if you look at the notes, there's actually two different sides. One says set 76, the other side says set 83. It just makes sense to put those together. It's two different lessons in the book, but most folks would put them in the same lesson, integrating even powers of trig and integrating odd powers of trig. So just hold on to those notes, and we'll come back to set 83 when the time comes, but today we're just doing the front. Okay. So find the set 76 side, and let's begin. The problem of the day is, how do you integrate? I could say trig, but it's really just sine and cosine today. When you have an odd power, there's a bit of a technique you need to learn, and after you've learned it, it goes pretty well. This is not usually one of the harder lessons, but there is a little bit of tedium to it. I'll just warn you. They get sometimes pretty long. First, before I get to the big idea, which really is Pythagorean identity and U sub, to do a problem, we need to remind your identities. What is sine squared equal to? 1 minus cosine squared, and cosine squared is 1 minus sine squared. That's deeply ingrained in your brain. In fact, I would bet if they asked you on your deathbed, you remember what sine squared is, you might even know, even then. What do you think? I'm curious. I would love to ask you people when you die, do you still know your derivative?
Are you assuming that we're going to die before you do? No.
Well, yeah. Look at the crowd you guys eat. I'm a specimen over here. I'm with 120. All right. Sine cubed. So why can you not just say, hey, it's 1/4 sine to the 4th? That's what a lot of people who are ignorant would do. A little knowledge is a dangerous thing. So I didn't mean to insult you. That's what you're thinking. Why doesn't 1/4 sine to the 4th work? Because if you took the derivative of that, you would pick up a derivative of sine, which is cosine, and you don't have cosine. So 1/4 sine to the 4th does not work. It needs to be a little more. Well then, the technique here that you'll use is to do a little bit of splitting first and foremost. When you have an odd, you're going to split a single first power term off. Of the odd power term. Okay? Now if you split a single odd power off, then that'll leave you with an even power next to it. That's where the identity comes in. If you replace sine squared with 1 minus cosine squared, use an identity on the even power. Well, that's what gets you rolling. If you then split up the difference into two integrals, then it would be the integral of sine minus the integral of cosine squared sine. We can split a difference up into two integrals, just not a product or a quotient or anything like that. Okay. Well, the first one's fine. Is the first one's antiderivative cosine or negative cosine? Negative cosine. I'm going to bring that way down here because on the other one I'm going to have to do a little bit of work. I'm going to show all the work, but then I'm going to emphasize that this can be done mentally. This approach has a product of two, where one's the derivative of the other. We typically use U sub. What would we let U equal? Do this in red. U is cosine. Du then would be negative sine, which thankfully I have a negative out front that I could borrow. It would then be positive 1 or positive U squared du. The antiderivative of which would be 1/3 U cubed, and then I sub back for the U with cosine. So it becomes negative cosine plus, not minus, plus 1/3 cosine. Now this, especially in this class, we have a lot of high-level people in this class. There are a lot of people that could do that mentally, and I am fine if you do that mentally, U sub, and you do not show that U sub. Understood? Thank you. Just got here. And you're already leaving.
Why didn't just get here? I was at the office.
No, you just got it. You just gave it.
Well, just a thought, yes.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm talking about. All right. So that's the big idea on a very straightforward, simple level one. Are we cool so far? Any questions? Okay, great. Let's go to a little more complicated. This one's still cubed, but the 4x means for a little more complicated use of. Let's try it. What do we do first? Split, yes. So we'll split it into, in the interest of time, maybe we can combine those first two steps. We can split it into cosine squared cosine, and then also use an identity for a cosine squared. Is that too much at once, or no, you're cool? You're cool. So after doing those two things in one, where do you come to? 1 minus sine squared of 4x times cosine of 4x dx. Here we split and subbed for cosine squared with an identity in one step. Again, you got to know yourself. If you feel like this is getting a little out of control too much at once, then you need to slow down. But if you're cool with that, fine. Okay? If you then went one better and split into two integrals, then it would start to take on that flavor. All right. What is the antiderivative of cosine of 4x? Let's see if we can do this mentally. Will it be sine or cosine? Sine, positive or negative? Positive. And what about the 4? 4 or 1/4? It is 1/4. Okay, so if you can do all that mentally, all the better. It'll save you some time. If you need to use sub it, then know yourself. Do that. What about the next one? In my mind, I think u sub, where u is sine of 4x, cosine, or du would then be cosine of 4x times 4. So for this to go really well, this would be u squared, and I would like there to be a 4 here, right? I could put in a 4 as long as I balance with a 1/4. So if all that could be done well, then this would be more like negative 1/4, the antiderivative. And what is the antiderivative of u squared? 1/3 u cubed. So you can see this is starting to get a little complicated. This is a little on the edge of where I think I could do it without a mistake. So if that's you, then show the work. And that's what I'm going to model, because again, I'm not going to, I know you want to be done as quick as possible, but if you're going to get it wrong, then what's the point? You might as well just put tan at the front and not even do the problem at all if you don't care if you get it right or not. So if this is the case, then something like 4 cosine of 4x dx, and then it becomes subtraction of u squared u, and that would be something like, oops, u squared du over 4. So I'm thinking more like negative 1/12 u cubed. Altogether, then when I do that, I get subtract 1/12 sine 4x all cubed, or sine cubed of 4x is fine. And that's my answer. Do you follow? Okay, so the 4x made a bit of a mess. Let's go a little different then. Cosine of the 5th. Still an odd power. So what do you reckon our first step is? Split it into cosine to the 4th and a single cosine. The single cosine, this will be my du later. Now, if du is cosine, then what does that imply about u? If du is cosine, then u is probably sine. U needs to be sine-ish to be sine. So in place of cosine to the 4th, I need to put it in sine terms. maybe in steps, 2 steps. How will you do that? I don't have any identity for cosine of the fourth. Cosine squared squares. There you go. The identity for cosine squared is 1 minus sine squared squared. Now here's where a huge source of algebra error comes. Is 1 minus sine the quantities, or sorry, 1 minus sine squared all squared just equal to 1 minus sine to the fourth? That is not how you square a binomial. What is the square of 1 minus sine squared? 2 sine squared plus cosine, or sine to the fourth cosine dx. Okay then. Boom. At that point then, your u sub is already here. What will you let u equal? Sine. And du is positive cosine. So with substitution, then it becomes 1 minus 2u squared plus u to the fourth du. Your antiderivative then is u minus 2/3 u cubed plus u to the fifth. And I have been not writing that step and just going back to the substitution, which you can definitely do. If you like to integrate and use sub back, that's fine. So if you end at sine minus 2/3 sine cubed, I'm using those parentheses, sine cubed plus 1/5 sine to the fifth. And we're going. Cool? Okay. Again, gradually getting more complicated. Say you had a mixture of two terms, cosine squared and sine cubed. You should always focus on the odd and let that be the source of your du. So you would start by finding the odd and splitting off a single powered term from the odd, leaving you with an even. Now then, we really have two candidates for identities. Should we replace the cosine squared and the sine squared? Why would we replace the sine? Yeah, sine is your du, so that means u needs to be cosine stuff. So all else should be in cosine terms. So we're going to leave the first cosine squared and replace the sine squared with minus cosine squared. If I do a little, you could probably bypass the distributing, but I'm going to distribute. I'm going to get cosine minus cosine squared minus cosine to the fourth in parentheses, and sine outside. Let u equal cosine, which means du is sine or negative sine. Negative sine. So negative du is sine. So the integral becomes, if you straight up substitute, it's u squared minus u to the fourth times negative du, or you could call it u to the fourth minus u squared if you like to bring that negative inside, whichever you prefer. I'm going to do that. Are you with me? Okay, so the antiderivative, u to the fourth would actually end up positive at the end. So what is the antiderivative of u to the fourth? 1/5 to the fifth. And what is it to the fifth, sine or cosine? Cosine, 1/5 cosine to the fifth minus 1/3 cosine cubed plus. All right. Finally, when there's one odd, then it's easy to know which to strip off to get the du from. But if they're both odd, You really can't go wrong because you could strip off the odd from either, though single from either one. In the interest of all our work looking the same, which one do you want to pull a single off of, the cosine or the sine? Is there, if I do it up here, then I'll have sine squared, and that's ready for identity. If I go here, I'll have cosine to the fourth, and that's not really ready for identity. So it feels like it'd be easier if you let the split come with the sine. It's your call on the homework, but in terms of ease of getting the problem done, I think it'd be easiest if you use this cube for the split. So, cosine stays the same. If sine is du, then I want everything else to be cosine, right? So the sine squared gets replaced with cosine. If I distribute, it becomes the integral of cosine to the fifth minus cosine to the seventh. Let u equal cosine du is sine or negative sine? Negative sine. So I'm going to get a little bit of switching of signs. So if you do all this in one step and keep it all fine mentally, all straight mentally, that's fine. I'm going to go slow so I don't mess up. So in essence then, because of that negative du, I'm going to change signs. And maybe 1/8 to the 8th of cosine minus 1/6 to the 6th of cosine. Don't forget. You track it? Okay. With practice, it becomes pretty straightforward. All righty. That's the end of that. Let me hand back ye old AP to let you know where you stand. We'll gradually, if you didn't turn this in already, would you put in faster, please, so you're not thinking and there are a few questions that were heavily missed, and I would like to talk about them. There are a few free response questions where people mindlessly gave points back, and that was frustrating. So we'll spend about 10 to 15 minutes talking about this and learning lessons from it. First of all, why are you doing your math in English? Do your English in English.
We don't do English.
You don't do English in English? What? What do you have? Something? No. Oh, you guys don't. That's just what my daughter said. You want? That's a cool sweater. Look at that.
I did that one on.
What the heck? Can't you just keep your hands to yourself? Okay. So, first of all, big picture. If you have a roughly 66% or above, then you are on track for a 5. The way I intend to grade this is if you're about at the 66%, I'll give you a B-ish. And if you're at the super high level, like 80% correct, then I'll give you A-ish, both on these practices and on tests. For the multiple choice, if you are looking to then further break that into am I on track for both, multiple choice, it's probably 9 or 10 out of 14. The whole thing was messed up because I tossed a question. It was out of 15, then it would be easy. You needed a 10, but because it's out of 14, it's not. You need to do a little better than 9, but you need to be at 10. On the free response, you'll need a you need to average a 6 on free response questions, which on 2 questions you need to go 12 or above. Okay, so that should tell you that you're really good at multiple choice or really good at free response and where you need to show improvement, or maybe you're good at both, hopefully. Some of these I want to talk about because when I tried to collect data on which ones were most missed, and I want to talk about the ones that were frequently missed. The first one, only 4 people out of about, I think I had about 27 people take this, so keep that in mind. This is out of 27 people. About 4 people missed the first one. You were to split it up into 2 integrals, which you have done a million times before, and integrate. Number 2, I was surprised that people missed that one. You needed to factor it and then evaluate. Number 3 was 4 people missed that, and the more that, if I remember right, many of the people that missed that didn't read the number, the normal. Some did tangent. So read carefully there. Normal means perpendicular. Normal is perpendicular. 5, I thought about this and I thought, well, you didn't have a graphing calculator, so I'm not sure how 9 people, I mean, okay, I can see how 9 people missed this, but I had people get this right without finding the first or second derivative. Now, I would love to be able to do this without finding the first and second derivative. Tell me how you did it, because I don't know how to answer this without knowing the first and second derivative, personally. So I was shocked by that, and I would suspect that it's just you being too lazy to actually take the derivative. I would say, on a case like this, it helps if you factor out e to the x as you go. It just makes for less terms. Instead of 3 terms or 4 terms, as you gradually get terms, you always have 2 terms if you factor out. The answer was none is false, all were true. Okay. 6 you were to skip. 7, 13 people missed this. Some people failed to remember the extreme value theorem. It's a continuous on a closed interval. It's an absolute extrema problem, and so it's more the approach absolute extrema are at endpoints or critical numbers. You would find f prime, set it equal to 0 to find the critical numbers, and then the candidates I had that were in the region were f at -2, f at 1, and f at 3. That went okay. And then the last part that people missed was, it says, what's the absolute min of, or sorry, what is this sum? Is this the same as absolute value of each and then at? Those are not the same. I had a lot of people do their calculus beautifully, and then they said, okay, I'll just take the absolute value of both, and it's 189. That's not true. These are not the same, unless both numbers are positive. That's just wrong, okay? To me, that's foolishness. All right, and these just, I think some people know they're hard, and they just say, forget that, it's a lot of work, I'll just take a guess. Some people just plugged in the points. Some did test strategy and said, I'm just going to find the distance from this point to 0, 0. So they did something like this. And that, on one level, makes a lot of sense. I totally understand what you're saying. And then they compared. Why is that not okay? Okay. Why can you say, what's the minimum? Let me find the minimum distance by just finding each distance algebraically and looking for the lowest. Well, you're making a grand assumption. What is it? You're assuming that these points are actually on the curve. And you don't know that. You don't know that. Okay, you can't do that. So if you wanted to verify they're actually on a curve and then look for the lowest distance, okay, then you're there. Me, I did it with actual calculus, being that it was a calculus test. So closest to minimum distance, and don't get me wrong, test strategy is fine, and I do want you to practice test strategy as well. But minimum distance would be something like distances. I mean, they're throwing you a major bone going to the origin. It's clean. And then you would say, instead of x or y squared, I might do something like 4 over root x squared. So distance is maybe x squared plus 16 x to the negative first squared. And then I found where d prime went negative to positive for a minute. Okay, that's how, in my mind, it would be done the right way if there were no multiple choices. This was end behavior. Most people did that well. I didn't see a lot of errors there. In fact, I only had 1 or 2 people that missed that. That was gratifying. Number 12, the derivative got a little ugly here. But they didn't throw you a product rule or anything like that. But you're differentiating with respect to time of both sides, not x. So 6 people missed that. That's okay. I was a little ticked by how many people missed 15. 12 people missed. So this I want to talk about because to me that should be half that or less. If they want where is the particle, then they want position, right? At time 8. The 2 concepts here are to get position from velocity, you need to integrate, and you need to use the initial condition. It's usually the second part that people messed up. There are 2 approaches to this: a definite integral approach or a indefinite integral approach. If you would do a definite integral approach, you'd say x at 8 is x initial plus the change in position. And remember, that's no calculator. Ending position is starting position plus change in position. If you do an indefinite integral, you just say, well, forget at 8 or 0 or any other thing. I'm just going to take the antiderivative of v because it's pretty doggone easy. That would give me something plus c, and you'd use the initial condition to find the plus c. That would then give you a position rule for any points, and then you could find, now that your x is complete, you could find x at 8 or any other point. Okay? Peace. All right. So that to me is a huge idea. That's a fundamental theorem of calculus right there. So that's a big idea. That needs to be improved on. You might see that on the test. 16. This ticks me off too. Come on now. Hold on to your boots here. I'm going to get mad. All right. Okay. So, all right. On your side, you could say, well, this is not fair because now we have an integrated absolute value yet. Okay, you've got an argument there. By the way, out of 27 people, 22 missed this. All right, so I understand your point. So this is what reading your mind, I felt like it was this kind of approach. Well, absolute value, I don't know how to do absolute value, so I'm just going to pretend it's not there. And I'll just integrate this. Well, that's super. You'll bury your hand in the sand approach to a problem. Yeah, I don't like absolute value, so it's just ignore it. That doesn't solve the problem at all. That is a big fat no. In essence, you're actively saying absolute value means nothing. It does nothing, and you can ignore it at all times. That, you know, is not true. I expected you to do this visually or graphically. What does the graph look like? What shape and where? A V shifted left 1. Then, what does an integral, definite integral, usually indicate? Area under the curve. Gosh, how could I find the area under that figure? Oh, it's two triangles. How about that? Boom, right answer. Okay? If you were to do this by the book, and if this problem were nonlinear, then you have to deal with the absolute value. You have to actually say, here, it's really not x plus 1. Here, it's actually the opposite of x plus 1. From -2 to -1. And here, from -1 to 5, that's normal, x plus 1. That's normal linear positive slope behavior. When you do absolute value by the book, that's what you do. But even somebody that knows that would do it this way. Unless it was nonlinear. Okay, so, do better. 17, 6 people missed that. The idea is you need to just split it. I've thrown that on a few problems, and so most people were there. That's cool. Then you need to use your 7 arctangent. That was fine. 18, I was happy with how many people could write a tangent line and use it to estimate. That was great. 5 people missed that, which I can live with. 20, 15 people missed this. Now, please tell me it was a typing issue that you couldn't read that. Even if it's a lie, tell me that, okay? Tell me that it's not, that you can't take a basic left-hand, right-hand limit problem and figure out what has to happen to make it continuous. If it's going to be, if not continuous, sorry, if the limit exists, is that the same as continuity? Do these pieces need to also be 3? No, that would imply if they were asking continuity, which they're not. They're not asking continuity, they're just asking, does the limit exist? If the limit exists, then that just means the limit as you approach 10 from the left needs to equal the limit as 10 from the right, and I don't need it to equal f at 10 or g at 10 itself, all right? So it becomes more like e to the, what did that say, 10 over 10 plus c needs to equal log of 10 plus 1. E to the 1 plus c needs to equal, what's log of 10? 1. E to the 1 plus c needs to equal 2. Take the log of both sides. And boom. And then this one I was happy with. That was a new idea. Derivative of exponential. And although we never done a chain rule, most people remember to use the chain rule. And that's cool. Okay. That's multiple choice. If you would like to go over more or go more in depth or more practice on one, let me know. On the free response, a few things by way of warning. This one, there was great, the mean, we are probably about a 6, but there was great variation in the answers. The standard deviation was probably about 2. So I'd like that to be a little more homogeneous. I think you'll agree that the area had to be 2 integrals. For the first one, it was 1 for the integrals set up with limits, 1 for the antiderivatives, 1 for the answer. Some of you are a little calculator dependent and could not get the numerical part correct, although your calculus was fine. B, if you're revolving this around the x-axis, then you're still going to need 2 integrals. So as far as the points goes, the first point was for, do you just have a basic clue of how to find a volume? It's an integral of pi r squared. So if you just have some form of pi times an integral of something squared, if that's anywhere in your work, even if what's in the integral is not right, you earn a point. Okay? 1 point was for knowing x is the variable of integration. You should know that if it's around x, then these cylinders are tiny thin dx slices. So if you have a clue at all, then you should have dx in here. And last but not least, you should also know that it's 2 integrals and the correct limits of integration with the correct. So 1 point was for the integrands with the correct limits. And that's pretty good. And then a quick gentle rebuke here. Okay, it's not acceptable to put, I don't know, okay? On the homework or any other time, even if you're not sure, put something down. If you're going to succeed on the AP test, I guarantee you there's going to be questions you've never seen before. I guarantee it, no doubt, okay? And yet you'll be able to earn points if you just make some connection and practice it before the test. It's not going to just all of a sudden you can make a connection. Practice fighting and scratching and making some kind of connection, even if you're not sure. This was 3 points, and there is absolutely zero excuse to get a 0 or to put a question mark. None. It says right there, P is a point on the graph, RIP, I don't understand. Line tangent to F. What do you reckon that is? Line tangent to F. What are you going to need to do? Take the derivative of F. There's the first point. If you just have the most basic clue of calculus, you should have known to do that. It pisses me off when I had people say, no idea. Come on, try, okay? Just try something. Even if it's wrong, try something. I guarantee you, leaving it blank will get you nothing. That's a fact. Okay, so find the derivative. Okay, now you know that the derivative could be lots of things, but there is a place where that derivative is perfectly at a right angle to g, or normal. So then, the part that you have to figure out, forget that p stuff, say, all right, I need perpendicular to g. Well, perpendicular slope is opposite reciprocal, right? So I need f prime to equal the opposite reciprocal of g slope, which is, what's the opposite reciprocal of g slope? 1. So really it amounts to find the derivative of f, set it equal to 1, solve. Okay? Okay, by the way, if you found the derivative of f, that was 1 point. If you just wrote, I need to set the derivative of f equal to 1, that was 1 point. I haven't even done the problem yet, and I've already earned 2 points. Actually, I would have named the derivative. And then solve for excess. All right, last but not least, the back. There are top 5 people that lost a lot of things on here, so you might listen carefully and learn from their mistakes. Okay, so this is, I think 3 people do this. Okay, here's the derivative, and I need is there a max, min, or neither here? So people said, okay, f prime is 0 or undefined at x equal 4 and 0. First of all, read the problem carefully. It says x is greater than 0. So is this ever an issue? No. Please read the problem carefully. Because if you go negative infinity now, you just lost the point, guaranteed. Okay? It's only for positives. Leave it there. All right. A lot of people did the derivative, the sign test wrong. That also makes me a little mad. It's positive then negative. So what's going on at 4 if the derivative goes positive to negative? Max. Okay, here's this conclusion. This is where I saw a couple, like 4 people, I said. F has a max because f prime goes positive to negative. What does this person earn? It's 3 points, okay? 1 point for identifying x equals 4, 1 point for max at x equal 4, 1 point for justification of max. How much does this person earn out of 3? They earned 1. 1. That's a ridiculous loss, 2 points. Ridiculous. Why or what's wrong? Here's what the person will read. Grade is. Okay? That's what they'll read. What do they have? Do they tell me that there's a point at x equal 4 where I'm reading? Nope. X equals 4 is not there. Okay? Do they have a point for a max at x equal 4? Nope. Not there. Is there justification for max sincere? Is the max happen because the derivative goes positive to negative? Is that true? Yes, that's true. They get 1 point. And that is stupid. Okay? F has a max. You might want to say where.
There's a 3. That's ridiculous. Okay, answer the freaking question. I'm a little worked up, sorry. Okay, also, all right, I understand the algebra's heavy. This is 3 points. What do you need to know concave up or concave down? Second derivative. This is 2 easy points. Second derivative, and that's before simplifying. If you found the second derivative correctly, then you got 2 points. Even if you then simplify it wrong, you still have those 2 points. Okay? You don't give them back. You then have to find where f double is 0, and then a sign test, it's around 6. That's for 1 point to say it's concave up or down. And this, remember, x is greater than 0. So don't tell me that it's concave up for negative infinity to 6. It's not. That cost you a point. Okay? Use the domain they give you. And then the last one, if you have f prime and you need f, you'll want to integrate, and then you'll use the initial condition. This often is also another point here. It says, the rubric often says integrates. Not integrates right, just integrates. That you know, hey, I need to integrate f prime to get f. Just writing f prime in an interval, you'll have to earn a point. Not even doing it right. There's a lot of soft points in here, okay? Boom, good enough. 75 questions. What do you have questions on 75? 6, did you say? Okay, 6, 8, 21, 15, 6, 8. Okay, here we go. 75, number 6. Okay, 6, it's easy to make a mistake in there in the details, so let's make sure we're good with the details. Okay, so reviewing the big idea here, if they didn't do this piecewise thing, what is going on graphically at that? What's happening in negative c graphically? There's a hole. So really, in essence, the question is, did they fill the hole? There's a hole at negative c. Did they fill the hole properly? That's what the question amounts to. Okay, so if it's continuous, then the limit from the left and the right, and wouldn't you agree the limit from the left and the right are both going to be this function? Because if they're left and right, then we're approaching from either side of negative c, and I'm going to use that for both sides. So I'm just going to say, rather than the left and the right, which you could do, I'm just going to say the whole thing. And that needs to equal, the limit from the left and the right has to equal the point itself, f at negative c. The limit must equal the point. Well, if we factor and then evaluate the limit, what is the function approach or the whole value f? Is that it's, if I put in negative c then, oops, negative c, then it's negative 2c. And what about f at negative c? At negative c, the function is 2c. You follow? Okay. Now then, do those equal each other? This, to me, is a fault in the question. Could they equal each other? They could if c was 0, which they don't say. So to me, a perfect answer would be if c is 0, then it is continuous. But if c is not 0, then it is not continuous. And I think that was their intention. F is not continuous. Actually, the question is, where is it continuous? So I guess it's continuous at all except negative c. Or, yeah, negative c. So I'm assuming c is not 0. Okay, cool. 8. Anybody need 8 still? Okay. When they give you a picture, you do not have to redraw that picture in your homework, but if they give you just a description of a tank, like at number 7, then you do have to draw the ends so I know where your origin is. You have this tank, and this is like the end of a rectangular tank, and how much force is being applied to this side of the tank. Okay, y equals x minus 2. They give you rho is 9,000 here. All right. Hopefully it's getting into your brain that the force on the face is the weight density, the depth of each slice, and the area of each slice. Remember, it's of slices, not the whole face. So if rho is 9,000, I can put that up front. And let's go with the depth. When the slice is at -1, is this filled, by the way? It is filled. Okay? When the slice is at -1, then the depth is 1. When the slice is at -1.5, then the depth is 1.5. So it seems like the depth is always either 0 minus y or just the opposite of y, yeah? You follow? Okay? Depth is a distance from the surface down to a slice, and so it should be made positive. Area, that area is not the area of the face itself. It's the area of one of these slices that's feeling pressure. The area, first of all, the base. Is the base of all these slices constant or varying? Varying, and so it's a varying horizontal distance. It's x, or is it 2x? Is it symmetric 2x's or just plain on one side x? I don't know. It's just one side x. What's the height of each of these slices? Tiny change vertically is dy. Now because it's dy, then I'm going to need to replace that x with something y-ish. If y equals x minus 2, then x is y plus 2. And I'm going to replace x with y plus 2, so it's all in y terms. Now that it's all in y terms, I need limits of y. What are they? -2 on the lowest to 0 on the highest. On these, you may use a calculator, although the integrals are pretty easy, I gotta say. But you may use a calculator. The units are newtons for force. Cool? 21. Is 21 still a question?
Happy Monday. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As much as I like to use guess and check, it does say use algebra, so. It's easier to make that one trig function by going to tangent. If I divide both sides by tangent, or cosine. That's how it gets you there. 5 and 40, she knows going to
cover our competition and offering a $20 cash prize to the artist for the best cover art submission for this year's location.
Does that make sense? How 21?
Visual art, photography, painting, or drawing must be submitted as cover art by February 15th and must center around the theme of voices and visions. Artists may determine this theme as they see fit, so this piece will be featured on the cover of Voices and Visions.
Savannah College of Art and Design will be at California today during 7 hours. We'll be meeting the assistant dean of admissions. Bring your artwork and all your art questions. Sign up with Namion.
Don't forget Career Exploration Series for Wednesday, January 24th, during those lectures with Staff Sergeant Joseph Morelli from the U.S. Marines. Morelli will be speaking on the many careers of Marines and Navy officers such as combat arms, combat support, technical jobs, and aviation skills. Learn how to qualify, how the jobs entail, and what advancements are available inside the military and civilian sectors.
Athletic Jags boys basketball basketball all three levels won all their games last week. 9 wins. Great job, Dad. This Wednesday, the boys and girls varsity take on Green Mountain at home. The team is taking class Saturday for this doubleheader. Girls are at 5:30 and boys are at 7. Next Friday, the boys take on Golden at Golden High School. We need fan support for the state for us three games. The team is locked down. Varsity's at 7 p.m. Go Jags. That's all the announcements. Have a great week.
This one's rough, all right. Okay, so I view this as not U sub because the powers don't work out, so I'm thinking more like arctangent. In preparation for that, I made the 1 happen first. Okay, now, if this goes well, this should be U squared. If U squared is 49/9 x to the 6th, then du is, U is 7/3 x to the 3rd, and du would be 7x squared dx. Cool? You with me? Now then, let's deal with that 9. Let's move that 9 out front, and we get x squared dx. Cool. 1 plus u squared, 1 plus, I'm starting to get lost here. Let's do this substitution also. X squared dx is du over 7. Oui? So I'm going to move the 9 out front and call that 1/7 du in place of that x squared dx. Then I have my 1 plus u squared. I get 1/7 arctangent of u. So this is 1/7 arctangent of 7/3 x cubed. That was a mess. Follow? Okay. Let me know if there's anything else I can help you with. That was pretty ugly, all right. Sing it. Wandering in the night. Just a flash. Exchanging glances. Wandering in the night. What were the chances? Maybe sharing.